actually a few different ways to get to Wander's next target, but I'm only familiar with two of them. The first requires riding aggro through a somewhat labyrinthine array of canyons that snake throughout the large upheavals of stone on the left side of the upcoming sands. The second is much more direct, and also much faster, foregoing the canyons completely in favor of simply going around them. That certainly helps, and I'm also always willing to take a path that lets me look at the huge bridge connected to the shrine. The whispering of the wind during this section really reminds me of how hard the solitude of the game can hit you in longer runs like these. After all, we have 6 whole Colossi under our belt right now. As a player without any prior knowledge or preconceptions as to what any game contains, it's hard to know what'll come at you at any given point. But with Shadow of the Colossus, at least at this point, in my opinion, the experience is unique enough to ease you into the mindset that maybe, just maybe, this sprawling landscape and the bosses that inhabit it are all there is. And that's pretty exciting, even if you just want to see how a developer can pull off a video game comprised entirely of battles with huge enemies and a minimal story. But anyway, what I was trying to get across was that Wander and Aggro are the only 2 living creatures in all of the miles and miles of the forbidden lands that the player can relate to. And that makes the fact that there are who knows how many Colossi left lurking in unexplored areas of that land just waiting for you very ominous when combined with the openness of the world and the silence while traversing it. It's a very minor detail, but I love the foliage and branches planted on the hills here. It's good to have visual flair like that, especially when it draws attention away from the more basic ground textures on offer. The location of the next Colossus lies behind the pillars here. Let's head there now. The song that plays once you enter the arena is one of the most memorable for me. Ko Otani really did a wondrous job on the OST for this game. If you haven't listened to it yourself, I cannot recommend it enough, and even if you've already played the game but never listened to the music on its own, you really should if the whim comes to you. I can almost guarantee that you won't regret it. My first inclination upon entering this arena was to climb to the top of the tower. I think that at that time I was expecting another bird Colossus from my experiences with Avion, or at the very least I was curious as to how I would fight a Colossus when most of the arena was water. After waiting for just a bit, I dove down for a little exploration. I'm honestly not certain as to why you're able to intentional given Hydrus' complete lack of animation. Oh right, did I forget to mention that the boss's name was Hydrus? That's my bad. It's a really cool name, the simplicity of which suits the boss perfectly. There isn't much that you can do to provoke Hydrus into attacking you. All you can do is swim somewhat nearby and let the fight, and Hydrus itself, progress at its own pace. He'll swim around for a bit, maybe even attempt a flourish or two, and then eventually try to electrocute you with the glowing spines that protrude across his back. If you can avoid this, you're golden and able to clasp onto the tail end of the creature. From there, it's time to make your way to its head. Different sections of the boss sink beneath the water's surface as you make your way forward, meaning you have to be as careful as you can with the timing of your movement. Stabbing the weak spots before each spike nullifies their ability of electrocution and, unlike most other Colossi, actually do pretty substantial damage to Hydrus' HP as well. Sadly, Hydrus became quite bored of such nonsense after my disabling of the second spine and plunged into unsurvivable depths. Once it decides to do this, there's nothing that you can do except wait for it to approach you again. Luckily, your progress on the spines is saved, and thus you can focus purely on traversing the fur. It's honestly impressive how striking the imagery provided by Hydrus can be. No moment shows this off more than when you're forced to let go and swim to the surface. When Hydrus lurched away from me, I was somewhat taken aback by just how deep he had carried Wander. You're forced to watch as the sea serpent coils away, deeper into the pitch-black void as you return to the surface. When you attack the sigil on its head, its movement becomes erratic and frantic, a total change from the way it was acting previously. It feels as though Hydrus begins to panic, as if the levity of this small being's attacks are just now registering and becoming clear. It smacks its head up and down on the water's surface, helplessly doing whatever it can to free itself from your grip. But there's nothing that it can do. Its fate is already sealed, and Wander's victory assured. Just as a warning that you may need, I didn't make much of an effort trying to find the tendrils as they escaped from Hydrus' corpse. I expected to be able to see them from the water's surface, but when I realized that I couldn't, they hit and it scared the bejesus out of me, so be warned about that. congratulation or fanfare. It's time to continue onward. A tale trapped within a pail, deep within the forest. A shadow that crawls on the walls. This boss description is honestly a cute one with the rhyming and all. It's also kind of a lie, or at least one part of it is. There is no forest to speak of on the way to the Colossus. We've got quite the long trek ahead of us, so you'll have to forgive me for getting a little personal now with what I'm about to share as we venture forth. I would be remiss if I completed this entire video series without bringing up an old friend of mine. Let's say that his name is Josh. Josh and I were never the closest of friends at any given time, more acquaintances than anything else. We had mutual friends, sure, but it never amounted to more than a passing, casual conversation with each other, and we only spent time together when in groups of those friends. I didn't really like that. I wanted to become closer friends with him and get to know him better, because he seemed like a genuinely kind person, and I felt just a bit strange not being friends with him like I was with everyone else that we knew. So I took the plunge and invited him to hang out at my place, and he said totally, dude. By coincidence, the very same day, I saw Shadow of the Colossus in a store and picked it up to play with him, even despite the game being very obviously labeled as single player. Once he arrived and we got settled in, I turned on the old trusty CRT TV, threw in Shadow of the Colossus, and handed Josh the controller. It was a little quiet and awkward at first, I have to admit. When we figured out how to climb on top of Aggro and started going towards the stairs opposite the exit of Dorman Shrine, I kind of started to get that tinge or seed of regret that you get in the back of your mind where you start to think, oh geez, why did I do this? What a bad idea. But then we reached the top of the climbing tutorial, and Valis took his first stomps past us. When we moved forward and saw him down the canyon a bit, there was what I can only describe as a collective whoa moment. We sort of looked at each other and were just like, okay, how the hell are we supposed to beat this thing? And all of the tension immediately lifted. The ice was broken, and it would stay that way. 2 or 3 times a week, he'd come over after school, and we slowly but surely worked our way through the game. We had finally broken that casual barrier that plagued us and became full-fledged friends. Eventually, as with many friendships, we drifted apart, and now I have absolutely no idea what he's up to or where he even is. But that was kind of why I wanted to share it. Even in spite of all of that, I cannot think about or play Shadow of the Colossus without at least partially remembering Josh, and it always serves as a pretty potent reminder of how video games and shared interactivity like that can play a role in, and possibly even spark the creation of, a friendship. There was a lot of build-up to that storyline, and it was very long-winded, but it just kind of happened that way. I hope I didn't bore you too much. Now we have to enter this structure in the middle of the water, and the pathway to this boss arena starts to get unique. Wander is forced to dismount Aggro and hop over this little stream there. From the outside, it's hard to fully discern what this structure's purpose could have been. And even once you take your introductory steps inside, it's still unclear. I always felt like this first chamber of the interior looked a ton like something you would find inside a dungeon in one of the later entries in the Legend of Zelda series. Specifically, it makes me think of Twilight Princess. Later on in the game, it's possible for Wander to obtain a stick. It was proposed that bringing the stick and lighting it with the fires on top of the pillars here may have unlocked a secret, but unfortunately it never bore fruit when attempted using an emulator. To clarify, it's impossible to get up there through conventional means. I really thought that Wander could have made that jump. It looks so close, but still so far. Kuromori is a lonely one. Even by Colossus standards, he's far more secluded than most of them. He's trapped in this ancient Colosseum, or, as Dorman seems to like to call it, Pale. As a boss locale, I really enjoy this one, especially the fact that you have to descend into it. When someone speaks of a Colosseum, normally my mind jumps to the famous Roman Amphitheater, so I quite enjoy that this one is not only quite narrow in comparison, but also underground, embedded within the earth, as it were. In order to begin the fight, Wander must be the aggressor, as he was with Avion. It doesn't take very long to see how Kuromori differs from the rest of the Colossi, his ability to scale the walls of the Colosseum with ease. But Calla, you might ask, what's the big deal about that? It's not like he can fit inside these little sections. And you're right, but he does compensate for that by having a pretty unique offense. Shooting large, electrified projectiles in quick succession simply isn't enough for Kuromori to be satisfied with himself. Though they would certainly be enough on their own, they also create massive clouds of an orange-red poison that drains Wander's health at a rapid rate. We need to reach a safer position in order to find the creature's sigil. Using the stairs to descend will get the drop on Kuromori and let loose arrows at its obvious weak spots. I'm not quite sure what he's doing there. I believe it might approach the window where he expects Wander to be and then funnel loads of poison to enshroud the entire area, but that's just a guess. And now, using my expert knowledge of the arena, I'll deftly sprint to the fallen boss, calculating in my mind the most optimal path as I prepare to finish him off with both impressive style and cunning strategy. Yep, that's what this is. I am altering game data by making Wander take certain steps in the arena, and that actually gives his ancient sword a huge damage modifier. So by the time I get down to Kuromori, he will be able to one-hit it. So look forward to that. Swing and a miss by an extreme degree. Time to do it all over again. While we wait, I'd like to talk about Kuromori's back. It's my favorite part about its design, not just from the aesthetic perspective, but also because it can be attributed to his anatomy as storage for that poison that he hurls Wander's way. His wide frame makes it easy to get on top of him, whether it's from his tail or his face, and his sigil locations become obvious shortly thereafter. There are two on his underside, but I'm not entirely certain as to why, as they effectively serve the same purpose, and splitting them two ways doesn't make for any variation. Add that on top of the hard limitation of him rolling over after a certain damage threshold, and it becomes even more perplexing. Now, it's a pretty simple rinse and repeat situation until Kuromori submits to the ancient sword. That's what I call frustrating. I'm just glad it's not difficult to goad the boss into repeating the same mistakes and climbing the walls again. I have to admit that Colossi are quite the slow learners. You may have noticed an attack move that I did for the first time in order to carry out what I believed was to be the final hit on Kuromori. By jumping, holding R1, and hitting the square button in that order, you can do a plunging attack for full damage without charging up. The cost of this is an extended recovery time, where Wander has to rend the sword from the monster's flesh. With that, Kuromori's final bout is at an end. Thank you so much. See you next time.